In this lesson, we'll learn how to add detail to the slabs by adding edges and steps in certain areas. So at the end of the last lesson, we had gone and created the external spline around all the slabs, and we had gone and added an editable poly, which basically makes it viewable in this shaded mode. Now, let me just go and remove some of the plan and other wall information that we don't need. So I'm just going to turn all these layers off. And we know that in these cases, by looking at the plans, if I just turn them on for 1 second so you can have a look, is in each case we have 3 steps up, since we have the same height difference between these 2 areas as well as these 2 areas. So we know that we need to now add that step information into there, and we need to start filling in these gaps in between the upper and lower areas or levels. So what we're going to do is we're going to work directly within this editable poly modifier. You can also add another one if you like to, but otherwise I think it's quite safe just to work on this editable poly. So what we can do to start is we can start by selecting all of the edges that we want to now go and move downwards. By moving downwards, I mean extruding them downwards, or at least adding extra polys to this arrangement. So with all of these selected, I'm just going to select this edge here. I'm not going to worry about this since it is facing into a wall and we're not going to see any edge there. So I'm just selecting the ones that are necessary and the ones that are going to be visible. And I'm going to press down on my spacebar, which basically locks the selection in, and I'm going to, using the move tool, hold down the shift, and I'm also going to make sure that my snap toggle is on. So with that done, you basically just hold down shift, and using snap you pull down those edges until you create a extra set of polys all around that edge. So then what I want to do is I want to deselect these edges since I no longer need them. I don't need to extrude them down anymore. And I'm now going to be working with this edge here. Now all you need to do really is just the exact same process. So lock it in and create an extra poly down to that entire edge. So next step is you want to add in these steps. So what you can do here is you can do it in a couple of different ways. You can either add a separate object, or you can go and model it directly into what you've already done. You could, for example, go and select these 2 edges. You could bridge that across, clicking bridge. You could select that poly by clicking that selection, and you could then just extrude that upwards by 150 millimeters, which is the height of the stair. You could then take that. You would also then just need to remember to delete the unwanted polys. For example, these side polys, and even the bottom poly. And you can see that by extruding you actually make quite a mess of the object, because you have all of these unnecessary other polys that you need to get rid of. For example, these side polys don't become very interesting, etc., etc. So you do actually make quite a bit of work for yourself by doing this method. So there are different methods, of course, in everything that we do, and you can always go and choose the best one for what you're working on. So I'm just going to continue with what I'm doing, and I'm now going to apply that same extrude to this step. So I've just basically divided that in 2 by adding a connect segment into that, or an edge into that. And I'm going to then just extrude again by the same amount, and I'm going to just re-delete those back faces that I don't need. And I'm going to now go and take the edge here and here, and I'm going to just go and bridge those 2 across as well, and that will basically finish off the stairs. And the last thing that I need to do is just to basically cap this. I do notice, however, that these 2 edges aren't joined. So one of the good things to do if you want to just keep your modeling nice and clean is to actually select these edges here and to just use the ring command. So basically just ring around, add an extra edge into that, and then just move it downwards so that it basically touches that area. So then what you can do is you can select your vertices, weld them by scrolling down to weld, and last step is you just want to fill this gap. So basically go to your border, select the border on both sides, and right click and click cap. So again, there are many different ways that you can do this. You could have just gone and modeled ordinary boxes. It would have been probably much quicker. So you could also go and use a spline and just draw in the zigzag from the side view and then just extrude it sideways. So there's all these different methods that you can use. The main thing that I really want to tell you here at this point, once you've modeled it, is now you can start thinking about what type of materials you want to use on your model. So it's a good idea to start modeling your edges in the places where you want to see that material difference. So in this case, if you want the top of your steps to have a different material to the sides, for example, if this is going to be a stone, a layer, then you would want to see some kind of edge and you'd want to see a thickness to it. So you can start to actually move your edges around on your model to start to correlate with what materials are going to be on it. For example, the exact same thing that we've done over here is going to happen with our timber deck. So let me just go and quickly draw in this timber deck, and I'm going to do that in a slightly different method this time. I'm going to do a method which is going to look like so. I already know that the height to width is the same as what we have here. So I'm going to just snap onto the height difference here, which is 150 mils, and that's going to give me that height. Now I'm going to go to my plan and I'm going to use the tread depth, in other words this distance here, to snap onto, and I'm going to use that original height to basically continue my modeling. So this is a slightly different technique again that can be used, and there we have our steps already done. So all of these techniques are perfectly fine. You could have done exactly the same thing here by just basically using your vertical, or at least your vertical in this dimension and your tread depth in that dimension, to go and zigzag your way up until you meet your upper level. So all these different ways are possible. So I'm just showing you the variety here. So then what you want to do is you want to use the edges again, and you want to just go and basically drag down those edges so that you can model the sides. So here, let me just go and add an extra vertice in place here so I can weld these two together. I have a shortcut on my keyboard since I do a lot of welding, so my shortcut is Shift W. So I can basically just have a keyboard shortcut for that welding. If you would like to set up something similar, then go across to Customize Preferences. So, sorry, let me just go to Customize and then Customize User Interface. And from there, go across to your keyboard and then search your editable poly shortcuts, and then you will see that you have weld over here. So you can basically weld your vertice, which is going to be this one, so Shift W. So you can basically just set that up to a different hotkey. If you do this type of architectural modeling, you will notice, especially if you do poly modeling, that you will be welding polys, or at least vertices, all the time. So you want to basically have the shortcuts in place that facilitate your type of modeling so that you can get your work done as quickly as possible. So the last step here, just before we finish this lesson, is I'm going to do the sides to this timber deck. And again, I'm not going to worry about too much, since I do want to also start modeling the pool area before I really model all of the other areas, because I do want to see how the other walls and everything else starts to relate. But again, I want to model the depth so that I just can see the depth of the timber, and any structure that is going to be supporting that timber can be basically done separately later on in this course. So let's just basically give a little bit of depth there, so that when we model it, it doesn't look like a flat 2D sheet. So we can now go and model the edges here as well. So I'm just repeating the same process as we go through by basically just pulling those edges down. And things that I don't see, for example, I know that the slab is going to be quite thick. I know it's going to be about 200 millimeters thick. If I don't see it, I'm not necessarily going to model it. So you don't have to be too realistic or too tectonic about the way you do things. You don't have to go and model the slabs the way they actually are going to be built. You just want to model what's going to be seen. I generally don't like having geometry touching itself or overlapping itself, or having especially two polys one inside each other, face to face or back to back or anything like that, because it just does complicate your model. It's going to cause errors once you start calculating your renders, and you basically just want to keep things as simple as possible, and as well it's going to make it editable in a lot with much more ease as you go and carry on further on along the workflow. So that is it for this lesson. The main thing that we looked at is how you can model the edges just by modifying that editable poly modifier, and then just a few different techniques for modeling steps so that you can just broaden your outlook as to how you go and attack all those different little problematic areas, such as these little differences in height. So that is it, and the next lesson we will go and continue with the rest of the building. We're going to start looking at how we can start modeling these door frames, and we're going to have a look at how we can use the existing geometry that we've already done for the walls to really help us with the modeling of the frames, just to basically speed up the workflow even more. You don't want to go and repeat things. So all of that's going to be covered in the next lesson, so definitely check it out.